YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today is November 15th, which means that we are halfway through the month of November, halfway through nonfiction November. So I thought I'd just share with you what I've been reading so far and what I'm planning to read next. Maybe give you some suggestions if you haven't found a lot of nonfiction that you have been loving and you want to hear about some of my favorites. So first I'll tell you that one of the most interesting books that I've picked up for nonfiction November, but also one of the most interesting books that I have read in a while is The Rise and Fall of Adam and Eve by Stephen Greenblatt. He is the professor of humanities at Harvard University, and this book is very academic and scholarly in its approach. Stephen Greenblatt challenges the veracity of the Bible based on the fact that there are other books that predate the Bible in terms of when they were written and that they tell similar stories. One such story that you might be familiar with is the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a poem that described several things that happened in the Bible, but that the Bible speaks about as being historic and unique. This is a book that will give you many questions, maybe not as many answers, but it will tell you other places that you can go to look for suggestions of answers. I first heard about this book, I think, from Steve Donahue, and I was interested. I requested it from the library, so it was also one of my borrow-a-thon reads, and this is my current nonfiction November read. So other books that I have laying around that are nonfiction favorites, this one, The More of Less by Joshua Becker, is about creating minimalism in your life, about the fact that sometimes having the empty suitcase allows you to admire what the suitcase looks like. You don't have to have it filled with stuff. So he talks about how sometimes getting rid of the weight of the stuff around you can actually be freeing, and pretty standard minimalism text. But I just love the minimalism of the book itself. I love how small it is. This is one of the first minimalism texts that I intentionally read, and I have a lot of notes in here. Number one, where he says, for each of us when we were born, what stage of life we are in today and what we have lived through and are still living through help to shape our relationship to things. And it reminds me of this exhibit that I once saw at the Modern Art Museum, which was Song Dong's expose. He took all the stuff that was in his mother's house when she died and made it into an exhibit. In the process of sharing her stuff, he explained how the kind of life that she led and the life that she had growing up meant that she was a hoarder. She held on to things because she thought about what their possible potential future use would be. And so she didn't want to let things go even when they were broken. We live in a time and culture where you can throw things out pretty easily and replace it if you ever need to pretty cheaply, pretty easily. So we really don't need to hold on to a lot of the stuff that we do. That doesn't apply to me and my books. I will always be a book hoarder. And if you haven't read anything on minimalism before, this is a book that I would recommend that you check out. The More of Less by Joshua Becker. Finding the life you want under everything you own. Another book that I love and I have read through completely, maybe just once, but every now and then I return to read just segments and excerpts of it, is The Math Gene by Keith Devlin. And this is about how mathematical thinking evolved. And so he talks about how people with mathematical tendencies might relate to information in a slightly different way, like the way you count. Do you see the numbers or do you see the words? And it is a fascinating book if you're interested in math and science and how the brain develops and how you can teach children the different ways. This is a fascinating book to read. I've had it on my shelf for years, and I can't remember where I got it, but it's one of those books that I love and read pretty often. Another nonfiction read that is one of my favorites is Steve Harvey's Act Like a Success, Think Like a Success. It's a book that I read once all the way through, and every now and then I return to pieces of it because it is about discovering your purpose, discovering the gift that God has given to you for you to give to the world, and how you can share it, but how in sharing it you're actually blessing yourself, how you're actually becoming a gift to yourself. And this one is, he talks about the people who should read this book. He says, if you're not excited about waking up and going to work in the morning, you need to read this book. If you're sitting around every day bored out of your mind, if you have time to do everything that anyone asks you to do, then you need to read this book. If you have time to watch all of your schedules, TV programs, as they air on TV and not miss an episode, then your life is not fulfilled, and you need to read this book so you can change. If you're getting more than enough sleep, or if you've accomplished a great deal in your life and you're wondering what next, then you need to read this book. It is a fascinating read. It has sections for you to answer questions, for you to do some self-evaluation and figure out, how to get the best out of your life, how to act like it, how to think like it, how to be it. And this is a book that I have recommended often. I even did a giveaway of this book once because I had a couple of copies. When I find books that I really like, I buy multiple copies and give them as gifts. So I've done that, and I would recommend it to you. If you haven't checked out Steve Harvey, he has another book called Jump, which is kind of sequel to this, taking the idea of your gift into even more detail. This is the book that I started off with him with, and I recommend it as well. One of my favorite nonfiction reads is A Woman's Worth by Marianne Williamson. She's the author of A Return to Love and A Course in Miracles, which is probably her more popular work. This one, of course, is targeted towards women readers and focus on women learning their value, understanding their place and their value in society. I have post-its in almost every chapter, so I'm going to try to find one of my favorite quotes, which is where she talks about the goddess, like the goddess that lives inside of every woman, the female godly spirit power that inhabits us because we are children of God. Because we are created in God's image, it means that we have God inside of us, and that is the power, that's the spirit that she calls the goddess. One of my favorite passages is on page 26, where she says, "All that separates the queens from the slave girls is a shift in consciousness from denial to acceptance of personal power." And she talks about how women sometimes submit to pain, submit to lesser roles than they deserve, and gives you power to reclaim that essence, reclaim that place, that value that you were created to have, but somehow you might have given away. And sometimes just seeing yourself as goddess, seeing yourself as a child, as a daughter of God, how that could be the thing that shifts your consciousness and brings you to this new place. One of my favorite reads, and it is nonfiction, so I thought I'd share it with you here. Just a couple of others. Freakonomics by Stephen Levitt and Stephen Dubner. This was about challenging statements that we've heard our whole lives and using data to prove or disprove them. There is one story in here that stands out for me, and it was about that drug dealers are rich. In this book, the authors share an actual experiment that I think a psychologist student conducted, where Venkatesh, I always remember his name, Venkatesh, went to try to prove whether these drug dealers, the guys who work on the street selling drugs, whether they actually make money and if it is economically viable to go into drug dealing. I read this book when I was in college. I was studying economics. I think my economics professor recommended this book and I checked it out. And it's been one of my favorites ever since. It's one of those books that challenge conventional wisdom in a very humorous way, that after you've read it, you'll never think about those status quo statements or repeat them in the same way. If you haven't read Freakonomics and its follow-up Super Freakonomics, then you should definitely check it out. Two more books. Spinster by Kate Bollick is about, I think it's a take on Virginia Woolf's Room of One's Own. And this one is about how sometimes being an unmarried woman gives you access to a life that you would have to compromise on if you had a regular spouse, if you had a partner and children and so on. And in this one, she explores the lives of famous women, I think famous writers, who have spent some large part of their life as single women, spinsters. It's a diary, it's a history lesson, it's a meditation on what it really means to reject the notion of the need to be married at a certain age and to just live one's dream, live one's passion for as long as one desires until you're ready to make a different choice. As with most of my nonfiction reads, I also have tons of post-its all over this book. And let me see if I can share one of them. It never ceases to astonish me how readily we presume to know ourselves when in fact we know so little. I'm probably going to do another one of these videos where I only focus on Malcolm Gladwell books. So I'm not going to talk about him too much in this video, but he blurbed this book. And it's one of the reasons that I chose it. I love the picture. I love the cover of this book. You know, this woman, she looks like she's ready for company, but she's just all dressed up for herself. And I think that that's the essence of what this book is about, that your life is not any less meaningless because you're not sharing it with other people. Yes, you want to share your life. Yes, it is good to have company. The Bible itself says it's not good for, you know, the man, in this case, human, to be alone. But you can still have fun. You can still enjoy yourself in solitude. And that is the beauty of this book. It is a beautiful book. It's a beautiful read. I recommend it. Yeah, all the books that I'm talking about today I recommend. So I don't know why I keep saying that. The last one I'm going to talk about today is The Art of People by Dave Kirpin. And this one is about building communication skills, but not just like organizational communication skills. How to improve your relationships, your social interactions, what you can do to maximize what you give and what you get from them. And I like how, you know, the author sums up. He says, in a world where we're constantly connected and one in which social media has become the primary way we communicate, the key to getting ahead is being the person others like, respect, and trust. Because no matter who you are or what your profession, success is contingent on not just what you can do for yourself, but on what other people are willing to do for you. And in this one, he talks about skills that you can use to get people to give you what you want, except I didn't read it quite like that. It's not just about people giving you what you want. Yes, that is your goal as you're moving forward in your organizational, your corporate life. However, you want people to be in the place where they want to give you what you want. So you just want people to like you, just want people to genuinely like and respect and trust you, even before they start giving you the things that you want. How do you get to that place? And so that is the basis on which I read it. I wanted to be able to communicate better. In my volunteer position, I would frequently make excuses and like avoid conversations because I didn't want to have conflict, didn't want to have confrontations, didn't want to admit where I made mistakes and so on. And so I just wasn't communicating with my director, and he challenged me about my communication skills. I was also in a relationship with a person who said that I didn't communicate my thoughts and my feelings, and I got tired of hearing that, and I said, okay, I read, I'm gonna find a way to figure this out and just to do better. And so this is one of the books that I read and studied actively when that was being challenged for me. Reading this book was a big source of inspiration, and I did get a lot of tips on just how to improve my social interactions, how to do better with the relationships that I was in. And if I have successful relationships now, I can credit this book as being one of the things that helped me. So I recommend it from that perspective. And so that's it. Those are 7 of my favorite nonfiction reads. Thanks for watching this video. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you are participating in Nonfiction November and how it's going, if you're enjoying what you're reading, and if you're learning some new things, or if you have some recommendations that you want to share. A nonfiction book that you've read in the first half of November that you want to share with me because you think that my life will just not be fulfilled if I haven't read it. Go ahead and leave that in the comments and we'll talk down there. So until next time, happy reading. Bye.